Welcome back to Halle. The next talk is called Occupying Excavators and Hashtags Against Capitalism. The next speakers are calling themselves the speaking entity of those who carry justice into the world. So our talk is called Occupying Excavators and Hashtags Against Capitalism, and let's start with the organizational stuff. In this talk we will talk about the climate catastrophe, we will show videos with police violence, and there will be mentions of racism, sexism and misogyny. You will find the warnings on the slides before the relevant slides. Our slides you can find under rc3.ende-gelände.org, and you will also find alternative texts for images there. The talk will not be available in sign language, but it will be subtitled later. We are here for Ende Gelände. We are a collective against coal energy, and we also started with climate camps and occupying woods and big events against climate change, and the concept that we have to take climate change into our own hands. I am Struppi, and I'm from the I came from the vegan Sunday brunch to the occupying of excavators. I tried lots of things, from the local left party to the to animal protection, and then got over to the social media teams. So we get connected with memes and schnitzel and one or two. And I don't own a Facebook or Instagram account, even though I have to maintain some pages on those platforms. I am Tim. Okay, thank you. I have followed Ende Gelände for a long time online, and then at some point with the contact was invited to one event and convinced to stay, because the way people treated each other just excited me. I am also involved in the social media and Twitter team, and that's how I got there. Twitter is more of a hate-love relationship, and privately I'm more active on the Fediverse and Mastodon. Ende Gelände is the core topic, fossil energy and the capitalism that is associated. It's from the Deutsche Bahn to ThyssenKrupp and other big companies in Germany. When Ende Gelände was founded, coal was one of the biggest topics in climate change in Germany, because the lignite coal that was mined in Germany is excavated while taking up lots of land, and is also called blood coal. By going into the coal, into the mines, and just blocking the excavators, we stop the mining of coal. So to show how this looks, we will show this video. It will have some glitching artifacts and blinking lights, and also show police violence. So if you don't like it, come back in about 2 minutes.
Es geht anders, wir können eine andere Gesellschaft aufbauen, wir können den Systemwandel schaffen, und wir werden da auf Widerstände treffen, aber wir werden geschlossen, basisdemokratisch das durchziehen. Climate justice! Now!
Dass Ende Gelände und Fridays for Future zusammengehen, das ist klasse, und das braucht's. Weil nämlich durch alle Gesellschaftsschichten, durch alle Altersklassen, alle an einen Strang ziehen müssen.
Unsere Rolle ist jetzt, noch mal stärker zu betonen, dass es eine Systemfrage ist und Klimakrise kann man nur bekämpfen, wenn man sich auch an den Kapitalismus rantraut. Ein globaler Kohleausstieg wird nicht passieren, wenn wir nicht vorher den Kapitalismus abschaffen.
In einer großen Gruppe und mit viel Aufmerksamkeit zu zeigen, wofür wir stehen und den Leuten einfach noch mehr klar zu machen, wir müssen jetzt handeln.
So, and now we get back to why exactly us two are here, and that is public relations. At Ende Gelände, we are doing public relations in two kinds, which is the press and the social media part. Press will give interviews and write official letters and worries about how we get our matter into the media. At social media, we mostly do shitpost. We do have some aspects and procedures that we adhere to, but this is mostly what we do. So, public relations, we don't just do for fun. We often have fun, but we are looking to fulfill some goals. So, at first, we want to pass on information. We blockaded the excavator XY. So, we don't just want to put that out there. We want to influence the discussions and the opinions of people. So, we want that if somebody builds a terminal for liquid gas, that is not just given in the public media, but also from us. We want that people know what gas means for the environment. We want that the climate crisis effects in the global south get recognized more. We want to tell the stories of the activists, which might look like big events like this one. And where we invite people to maybe blockade things or just be an investment risk for companies like RWE. But we also want to show things that happen in the background, people that just work all around the year, around the clock, to show that just make possible the things that the activists do. And lastly, we want to mobilize. We want to show our we do like big summer events, and we don't just want to talk to guys, white, young, studying guys, but we also want to reach people that are not always present in our circles. So education is also a small part of what we do, the legal consequences and, for example, and why it is maybe anti-racist practice not to talk with police officers. And to influence the discourse around these topics, we work with a couple of core messages. So we want to really make a point out of things. So, what we call sports reporter,
so we want the media to tell our stories, and in order for us to be able to tell that, we need short and clear messages. You can see those messages on the slide. This is what they look like.
Gas ist ein Brandbeschleuniger der Klimakrise.
Gas is an enhancer of the climate crisis. Gas is, like coal, very important and is a contributing factor to the climate crisis. And clean gas is a dirty lie. You can see our postulations here. And it's sadly we have to put a lot of effort into communicating facts because many people block out the facts or are not even aware of them. And we have to limit ourselves to clear core messages so that our messages don't get lost. We need to repeat those messages again and again, else they're forgotten. People mostly talk about us and not with us. So our protest actions need to speak for themselves. I will show you now an animated slide with a low frame rate. Frames are the frame in which we recognize our reality. So if we look a bit further than the power we consume, we see the mining process in South America and people losing their homes. And we need to name those things. It's about not talking about climate change because the word change is connotated positively and it gives us a wrong representation of what is really happening. At the World Climate Conference in Bonn in 2017, we were able to challenge the picture of Germany as the leader in climate change reduction. In 2015, we used the image of a red line, whether that be a red band we used during protests, and we made it clear that red lines can't be crossed. Our red line is the 1.5 degree limit. And if Germany continues mining coal, we have no chance to keep this limit. And this is why we protest. The 1.2 degrees we have currently is already disastrous. And Vanessa Makate from Uganda has a very powerful message there, that the people in the global south are already experiencing the effects of climate change, which is something that we don't see and recognize in the global north. And it's a completely different dynamic in the global south. When talking about the media, we also need to talk about problems with media. Media reproduce racism, sexism, etc., as we all do. That means that BIPOC, that means Black, Indigenous and people of color, are underrepresented in the media. Successful social media work is what is needed to make those people visible, and we try to do so as well. We tend to, unfortunately, favor men. And this is why we choose our spokespersons very consciously. For example, sometimes we prefer to have men cooking and women being the spokespersons.
stellen sich Gruppen oder Institutionen
Tokenism
als emanzipiert
is
und
when
divers dar,
groups
dafür Anerkennung zu
present themselves as emancipated and diverse. However, within those groups, positions of powers and privileges still exist. So, for example, if the only black woman is forced to take the position of the spokesperson for racism. We want to avoid tokenism and still represent minorities. And this is not easy for people who are not experienced with it to understand. So, for example, if you ask a black person to speak about racism, ask yourself, why are you doing that? Is it really about getting to know that person's perspective, or is it about representing yourself? Are you really attributing certain characteristics to that person because they're not white? Also, not every woman wants to always have to explain misogyny and why feminism is necessary. You should also be aware that spokeswomen are in a very vulnerable position. And black women or women of color are even more affected by that phenomenon. So you must put very much thought into how to deal with spokespersons and how to choose them. Spokespersons should always have a body that can take tasks from them and be there for them. A shitstorm should be managed by other people, and also good relations between people in a group is very important. Mistakes happen, that's completely normal, and the activism is still really important and really great. People who are in front of the camera and who tweet are very visible, but there's a lot of work behind that. And we will now get into the topic of social media.
Yeah, social media. So, we have our core topics against capitalism and stuff, but the climate crisis, of course, doesn't take breaks between our big media actions. So, we constantly point our finger at society and show all of the weaknesses. We don't really want to be the voice of the unheard or of the suppressed, but we just want to make sure that the voices are heard, because the fight for climate justice is bidirectional, and no matter if we are occupying woods or working on the visibility of police violence, all of that is part of our social media work. How big our reach is something that we recently learned is where a person from Chadha recently occurred and mirrored a bunch of our actions and said that they were inspired by us with their overall outfits during an action in Australia. So the invention of the wheel, or we're not just our ideas for posts have many various sources. On one side, it is of course the representing the collective and showing, like, carrying messages both inside and outside, and that might be hours of telephone conferences But then many of the people from the collective are also active within the sea bridge or with occupations, and so many of them work. And then often we are also contacted on social media or using email, and we can't always respond to everything, but we are scanning Twitter and Telegram and various channels and are networking with lots of other accounts and just see what's going on. Currently, we're more working on Witzerat, which is a village near a mine that would be torn down soon, and so we are preparing that. And similar to one of the mass actions that we do, we always inform people, but we also respond to the daily actions of police and institutions. And we are all also very politically active and are continuously reading news and legal results and stuff like that. And just in case we haven't mentioned it before, we turn it all into memes. Shitposts are our everything. So Tim and I, we are both from the statewide social media team, but all of the local teams also have their own social media presences where they show their individual progress and maybe some legal progress they made, and also call for action on local events. So, which social media platforms do we use? Our primary platforms are Telegram, Twitter, Mastodon, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube and PeerTube. Also, there's a podcast. Ende Gelände produces a lot of content. Telegram. So Telegram doesn't have a great reputation, and we also underestimate it, but often there we can reach people that we don't really need to convince, and also some people from the police. But even though there are also some more right-wing politicians and people, and on Telegram many posts are shared a lot, and it is very easy to mobilize a lot of people. And recently there was an action where barely any people showed up, but using Telegram we were able to mobilize a lot of people to get there, to the point that the police had to take people away. So multiple times a day we post to keep people up to date. Twitter. The Bird's Cage, and also the Mirror in the Fediverse Mastodon. One of our main platforms. Twitter carries the political discourse in a very sustainable manner. So nothing can go wrong there, because nothing can be posted there that has even a little thing wrong that can't be carried far and wide and is seen by everyone. Twitter also is very much close to the pulse of time, and one has to post everything in a very short manner, and some shitposts can say a lot of things, even though the text format is so short. While during actions we post roughly once per 15 minutes, and during that time we have to prepare all of these things beforehand, prepare wording, prepare the messages that we actually want to get out. Often we have to go really fast if maybe a chain was broken by the police. So the hashtags for the big days are already prepared before all the time, whether that's hashtag investment risk or shame and something. Many easy to understand, easy to remember hashtags are very important. Instagram. Hip, young, modern, woke. Many people can't even think away from Instagram anymore. And it's much more audiovisual than, for example, Twitter, but also not as well frequented as the other channels. It's more the light tower kind of communication. Messages that don't really correspond to specific events. We would rather post to the different channels. On Instagram, usually people follow us that are younger or maybe are more mainstream oriented and not as politically involved. The reach of left account is limited by Facebook and Meta, although topics are often more complicated and not that easy to communicate on a platform that is oriented towards short-form content and low attention spans. That's why we often use a lot of audio posts, and we always use multiple languages, mostly English and German. But most of our followers are mostly German-speaking, though. Facebook Trollbook, or how you can occupy 55,000 fans. For Facebook, we are Schrodinger's climate activists. Simultaneously, we do nothing and we take away the power from the hospitals. It goes really well if the posts go against coal or cars. People will usually cry for the fact that climate activists should go to prison and that somebody should take the SUV to drive through the activist groups. But there are also a lot of people that hold strongly in the comment sections against these people. Facebook has a much higher age group usually. People beyond 30, for example. YouTube and PeerTube. Videos also belong to our content. Either live streams or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, but also on YouTube. Because we make a lot of videos, but they are usually about everything that happens, from the events that we do, from meetings and everything else. YouTube is also can be found on the Fediverse and can be subscribed to using Mastodon. Podcasts, all the hype. So we also have an Ende Gelände podcast where we cover various topics and invite various guests, for example, about topics like individual ownership and property, and why extending the Autobahn network maybe is not a great idea. But we also cover history and philosophy and anti-racism and all of the other topics that are relevant to the Ende Gelände cosmos.
Different platforms, same post.
Different platforms, same post? Why not? It works. It would be very easy if the social media team would only have to care for one post. But that doesn't really work. What all platforms have in common is that they really need the really well-speaking images and videos are well-liked by everyone. But that's already where the similarities end. These platforms are as different as the people that use them. Twitter users are used to get all of the facts in a very short format, cut down sentences, hashtags, everything broken down to its bare minimum. Facebook usually needs a lot more context. And ideally has a bunch of emoji in there. Instagram usually also needs a translation into the English. And while Telegram really isn't as time sensitive, that would, for example, not at all be an option on Twitter. Reposts don't work at all on Facebook. On Twitter, reposts are a really good way to push your own account and reach more people. Connections between multiple accounts aren't a big problem on Twitter. On Facebook, that's barely possible. That really makes communication a lot harder. Community management. How can I lose trolls in 10 answers? So you can feed the troll until it explodes. But often we don't want to give them as much attention, especially when it's about racist and misogynist comments that they just leave everywhere. And we block, we delete, and we moderate heavily. We also look for hashtags and look for trolls. We also report them, especially with Hanau. That was a very big thing that happened. if we feel like people are open for dialogue and opinions, but if on the other page, if the people are basically some sort of Trump wannabe, it's usually not worth the effort. So we also try to find the people that are reading with, and we want to catch them and try to not have them go down that route. We do, of course, not have limited resources, and so we can't always every time put the effort in of re-explaining and re-explaining why we are acting here and not in China or somewhere else, because we here in the global north are actually producing a lot of the CO2. Very much apart from the fact that the choice we have in supermarkets here is not really in comparison relevant as opposed to Madagascar, where many people are still starving. So, accessible posting. Posts should be accessible to everyone, just like the events. So, posts shouldn't be overloaded, should be applicable to everyone that reads them. There are very exact guidelines for this. On Twitter, for example, you can add a image description to images so screen readers can read them. Hashtags need to have upper and lower case so they can be more easily read. Clean gas is a dirty lie as opposed to clean gas is a dirty lie. Share pics shouldn't be too bright. But we have to be we have to use emoji sparingly to not overload people and make the text more readable. Videos should have subtitles, so they can be read by ideally everyone. We also try to avoid too long sentences and maybe complicated words, which might be difficult if one talks about neo-colonialist structures, even though it can be summarized in one word. Shit. So these posts are not just accessible, but also low in discrimination. So we try to include as many people as possible. We try to use neutral words, and if that's not possible, we gender with a star. We also use the terms BIPOC, like for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and we also take care to add this underscore. That means that not just these people, but also even more are intended to be spoken to. Good social media work will always make everybody that is involved in the fight visible and is understood by absolutely everyone.
But of course, there's also criticism on the platforms. We've all heard about the Facebook papers, and we knew before that Facebook is a capitalist data megalomania, and is also bad at preventing hate speech. You can see plastic images from Mexico, or you have human trafficking done over Facebook. There are also shadow bans and bans, and we don't want to have that used against us. So this is a topic we reflect on a lot, but still we are dependent on these platforms in order to garner attention. And we only have 1,000 followers on Mastodon versus 64,000 followers on Twitter. But still, we try to involve the Fediverse to reach as many people as possible, because the worth of an action is measured in the media attention and attention on social media it creates.
Wer jetzt noch ein Fracking-Gasterminal baut, hat seinen moralischen Kompass.
If you're building a fracking gas terminal right now, you've lost your moral compass. We're a self-organized group for the first time here in Germany. We did different protest actions. We want to stop power generation from fossil fuels.
We have to stop emitting so much carbon.
We have to stop emitting so much carbon. Our fight for climate justice is anti-capitalist and self-organized. And this is how we define system changes ourselves.
Much too important that we all stand together and continue fighting against the oil and gas corporations, which are killing communities across the world.
We want to paraphrase that and say that the open veins of Latin America and the open veins of the global south continue to flow today in the canals of Imperial Europe, and it's time for the climate justice movement to take to these canals to block this colonial fossil fuel extraction and actually have a chance at winning the climate crisis.
So, für uns geht's jetzt in ein neues Jahr.
So, now a new year is starting for us. We will start by defending Lützerath, which is actively being threatened by RWE, a German energy giant. I hope that this gave you some good insights about our work in Germany. You can have a look at our social media pages and our websites. We would love to meet you in the 2D world and chat. We would like to thank Chaoszone, who are hosting us today, and we're also thanking everyone who is behind the organization, who is translating, and who is facilitating this talk. So we're also available for your questions, so don't hesitate to ask your questions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim and Struppi. You gave us a lot of insights and shared your experiences, and we could learn from that. About the questions, how often have you been blocked on social media and why? Have you counted the shadow bans?
Struppi oder soll ich?
Struppi? Or should I?
Mach du ruhig.
Nah, you can do it. So, on Twitter, before we had the big event, there was something very close, but that was about to be solved with the two-factor authentication. You can imagine that our social media accounts are also very prone to being compromised. And so, yeah, those are more the general problems. But we have also had various accounts operated by smaller groups that have been blocked. Those are not very nice procedures to get out of that, and we have no control over it. So we're very happy that we do have people that can follow us in other places. And yeah, it is a big danger, and of course the worst case for us.
Okay.
And of course one has to say that on Twitter, for example, we have the lucky event where we also have an international account that we could move to, which is very relevant for us since that is our main platform.
Bei den anderen Plattformen allerdings nicht.
But on the other platforms, you don't really have that.
Ich kann mir und die Zuschauer können sich vorstellen, dass
So me and our audience can imagine that this arbitrariness, the technical and content-wise arbitrariness,
widerspiegelt und erzeugt und
reflects the technology criticism and how it's justified. How do you connect that to social media?
Also letztendlich sind
Okay, so for a very, very long time, we have been standing on our website. We are aware of the criticism of, for example, Facebook, but I don't know the exact statement anymore. But of course, we are there where our activists are, and so we do have Telegram as well. But practically, we are about exiting coal, and not necessarily about changing social media. But of course, we are open to other platforms.
Ich finde, das hat das sehr gut zusammen.
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Dann ist noch so ein
Then another thought.
Wenn man spezifische Kanäle hat,
If you have specific channels, why these social media and not others, such as TikTok, for example,
oder aber die
or local media, such as the public broadcasting services that also reach older people who are watching TV and not social media.
Okay, so the case is that we try to separate the work with the press, which is of course all of the things where we actively talk to media outlets, and so that's where we do that, and we do the social media part. So public media relations is really two very different parts, and that's why we do really try to supply both, but that's and
what about regional media?
I'm sorry?
Tim, du wolltest was sagen.
Ja, letztendlich damit
yeah, well, to have the media report on our events, something has to happen that is relevant to the media, like big events. So, and of course, for stuff like that, we do actively reach out to journalists, and we also have some journalists that will come with us for these. And yeah, when some of these things are relevant in the media, then Ende Gelände is also contacted for comment, for example, and that is also something that the press department does.
Ja, das ist sinnvoll.
Yeah, that makes sense. As an alternative to social media, oh yeah, Reddit and TikTok were mentioned. How do you choose your channels?
Also warum
So,
Social Media?
why do you use certain social media and not others?
Also bei uns gibt's da schon auch immer.
Well, so we do have a couple of discussions about this. We have thought about creating a TikTok account, but that didn't really fit our profile. It's not very political, and I think it also really has a bad reputation. That's what I can remember. Yeah, so TikTok is very much correlated to individual people, but in our organization, the people that are involved in roles change a lot, and we have very few people that actually want to put their face on camera, and that is something that really doesn't fit the system. We are not really based on individual personalities. And so maybe unfortunately, but also fortunately, mostly very anonymous. And so Reddit, we didn't really think about. Maybe we should do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Ja, schön.
Thank you.
Fragen sind
The next questions are about Ende Gelände itself. What legal action have you tried to take or have you been able to take, for example, against extradition of people because of coal?
Wir sind tatsächlich.
Well, we don't have a lot of lawsuits active. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, the lawsuits are usually done in correspondence with Greenpeace and the NAVO. And these lawsuits, of course, we support them. For example, the Eckhard Holkam case, one of the last residents of Lützerath, and so who's in a lawsuit against RWE, and of course we are solidary with them and try to support them, but we are not actively involved in the lawsuit.
Genau, ich würde auch sagen, wir
I would also say we don't act with our names, but as a collective. So suing is not really a thing we do. We support that. We will call to action for donations, and especially if they get very expensive, like the case of Eckhard Holkam. But we are a active collective and not somebody to sue.
How do you deal with threats against that are legally relevant? Do you file complaints about that?
Well, that I think happened sometimes on Facebook. Maybe you can say something to that? Well, no, not really. It doesn't do anything. Of course, that only works if people have the actual name online, and that is not something that is often done. And so if people were to actually do illegal things in our comment sections, like doxing or something else, then we would of course support legal action against that.
Okay.
Die Frage ist etwas lang.
There's a long question here, and I don't quite understand it. How do you mobilize and sensibilize people outside of the bubble of Twitter or Facebook? Because the person who poses the question.
So outside of the social media bubble, there is also the case that the local groups are mobilizing with local events like meeting groups, and also things like cardboard posters and stuff like that. It's not just social media preparing all of this, but there are a lot of very different groups that are active in recruiting and creating these events, and social media is really only the outside interface of these groups. Yeah, that is exactly what it's about. For example, there are information events where we get to talk to a lot of different people that maybe won't go to the next event with us, but are very important to talk to influence the public image of companies like RWE and the capitalist things they do.
Okay.
Okay.
Ja, cool.
Cool. There's two questions that are more theoretical. One, what does capitalism have to do with coal mining? And B,
was ist das Argument, dass
it's about refuting the argument that we couldn't live our lives as they are without coal. How do you do that?
Okay, so regarding the last thing, you can.
sind wir mit Sicherheit hier
We from the social media team are of course not the experts on this, but the Scientists for Future have a big study and that they did with lots of calculations, and I think there's enough information to inform yourself. And we also have a lot of papers, I think, on our website on this. Yeah, it is doable, I think.
Okay.
That's what I'd say.
Ja, sehr schön. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much.
Ja, danke euch.
Thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank an alle.
Yeah, thank you to everyone that was involved here, and to the viewers.
So, der nächste Vortrag.
Okay, so our next presentation is tomorrow. We're done for today.
Morgen geht's weiter um 11:30 Uhr.
Tomorrow we'll start at 11:30. Martin Hamsch
Get Your Tools Offline über
will talk about Get Your Tools Offline, an introduction to electronic gadget design for gadgets that have the functionalities of smartphones but don't have you dependent on large corporations. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you for listening and for your attention also from the translation booth. You just heard the talk Occupying Excavators and Hashtags Against Capitalism by Tim and Struppi. The talk was translated for you by She's a Pirate and Oscar. If you have any feedback for the translation, please leave it under the hashtag C3Lingo on Twitter or Mastodon. Thank you very much and have a great RC3.